today we've been looking at the area between Grand Gulf and Steel Bayou. A couple of days ago we looked at the area north from just below Memphis down past Greenville and almost to Vicksburg. The good news, of course, is that the Mississippi River levees are holding, and that's uniform. The cooperation that the Corps of Engineers and the hard work they've given has been something that we're grateful for. They have had occasional sand boils, which they have dealt with immediately and effectively. The levee looks good all the way down, not just an untrained eye like mine, but the experts with the levee boards and with the Corps. No question, as you here in Vicksburg have seen, structures that are between the levee and the river are flooded, and the river's going to continue to rise about 3 more feet, and so that's just a fact. The structures on this side, on the land side of the levee, in some areas we have flooding because of backwater flooding, because of rivers or creeks that can't get out because there's no place for the water to go. The biggest issue we're going to have with backwater flooding, of course, is going to be in the South Delta, where the Yazoo will be staying within its levee. However, there will be some topping of the levee around Steel Bayou, and the topping is going to be several inches to 1.5 foot, depending where you are along the backwater levee. And that's going to have an effect on the areas that are just north or just west of the levee. The issue for most of those people is, will the levee hold when it is topped? That is, after the water starts going over it, will the levee break? We don't anticipate that. The Corps and others have done a lot of work in armoring the levee around Steel Bayou, which is where the topping is the most likely to take place. The other big area where we will have severe flooding is in the areas affected where there is no levee on the west side of the Yazoo River. That's generally between Satartia and Yazoo City, but with the effects of that and backwater, that water will back up into Humphreys County, into Holmes County, and you'll have water to elevation of 107 feet there, where on the area protected by the backwater levee, assuming it holds, then we'll have water at a level that's anticipated to not get beyond 95 feet. The thing I would say to people, if you haven't already gotten out and you're in that part that's going to have 107 feet, if you're east of the Will Whittington Canal and between that and the hill line where the delta ends, you need to go and get out now while you can. Roads are closing every day, and they're going to continue to close, and some people may think, well, their house is not underwater yet, but they may not recognize they can't get out because the road is closed or may become closed. So if in doubt, people should get out. We want people to evacuate rather than have to be rescued. In the area where we do not expect the water level to go above 95 feet, people still need to be cautious, prudent, and prepared. If the levee breaks when it's topped or after it is topped, we have the possibility that 107-foot water at elevation of 107 feet will go into that area south of Hollandale, the area around Valley Park, Holly Bluff, the area around Cary, Rolling Fork, Anguilla, as far north as Hollandale. Now, for that, the southernmost of those areas, that'll happen very quickly. It'll happen in less than a day. And when we're talking about water rising from 95 feet to 107 feet, that means the water's going to get 12 feet deeper in a matter of less than a day in some places. So we're asking people and urging people to be prudent, to get their property as safe as they can, and to get themselves out of harm's way before we meet the crest. This is the last weekend people are going to be able to do that in that area west of the Will Whittington Canal. People east of there have already had to evacuate, or should have evacuated by now. I'm proud of the cooperation that you're finding among federal, state, and local authorities. Supervisor Lauderdale and Representative Monsoor were talking to me about the daily meetings that are going on here between MEMA and FEMA, the local authorities, the state authorities, and we're seeing that all up and down the Mississippi River. We have state meetings every afternoon, and so far so good. But just because things have gone well so far doesn't mean you can let your guard down. Now, everybody needs to pray for the best, but prepare for the worst. The elevations for the river levels remain the same. We expect the river to crest here at Vicksburg on the 19th. That's next Thursday. We anticipate that once the river crests, it will stay high for several days, that it will not start dropping fast. Those of you who've paid attention will notice that the river's not rising as fast as it was a few days ago as it approaches the crest. But we expect a long, flat crest. That is, we expect for several days it'll stay up around 57.5. That means in the backwater areas it will be very slow, that we will have areas that will be underwater for 3 or 4 weeks. And people need to plan for that as they go forward. Let me just finish with one thing that I want everybody, I hope all the TV stations and all the newspapers will show on their screen. If somebody thinks they might have been damaged by this flooding, or that they might be damaged by this flooding, they should call FEMA's line to register. Very simple. You call 1-800-621-FEMA. That's 1-800-621-3362. That's the only way to get in the system to get any support or any help. And if don't expect somebody to come find you and say, hey, you're qualified. There's no way for anybody to do that. FEMA doesn't know how to do that. You need to call in and register. And then the system will follow up with you and find out what you're eligible for. But right now, we have some people who are displaced, who are out of their homes. They are eligible for shelter, or they're eligible for rental support, to where they can get help in finding a place that they can rent, staying in a motel or whatever it is. But there's nobody that can help you do that unless you take the first step, which is to dial 1-800-621-FEMA and register. We have had very, very few people register. Very, very few. And people need to go on and register, because the further we go along and the more property that's damaged, the more assessments we get of property damage, crop damage, job loss, whatever it is, the more people are going to be calling in. Now's the time to call in and get registered, and then we'll go from there. With that, we'll take questions.
Governor, can you give us an idea of what you saw on the ground, from the air, homes, businesses, farmland that's now been...
Well, the levee is holding everywhere on the Mississippi River, so the only thing you see on the river is those structures that were built between the river and the levee, on the river side of the levee, and that's totally inundated, with the exception of Laterno, where part of the Laterno property is still out of the water, and I understand they're still operating partially at Laterno. Those are the exceptions, some industrial properties that were elevated above. But west of the Mississippi River levee, generally underwater. As we flew Steel Bayou, you could see the work that has been done there, as well as some other places on the levees that's comforting. The armoring that has been done that is totally complete. In the backwater areas, there's a tremendous amount of water, but not as much as there's going to be. When we came down from Greenville 2 days ago and flew over the area between Belzona and Yazoo City down to Satartia, of course, there's a much, much, much larger area that is underwater than there is here. But look, for any one neighborhood, for any one home that's underwater today, it's a tremendous disaster. And there is some of that throughout this whole area. I should mention that National Guard are being activated today, being put on alert today, who will start tomorrow. We'll have a company of MPs, of military police, who will be working in 6 counties: Warren, Sharkey, Issaquena, Yazoo, Humphreys, and Washington counties. They will be on duty. They will form up tomorrow. They'll be on duty no later than Sunday morning in those counties, working with local authorities, particularly law enforcement, the Mississippi Highway Patrol, Wildlife, Fisheries and Parks, and MDOT, who are all those law enforcement agencies are working with local law enforcement and the National Guard.
Governor, where should people go and how long should they prepare to be there?
There are shelters in a number of towns around the edge of the flood area. We're finding that most people are staying with family members, with co-workers, with people from their church, and that sort of stuff. It's been interesting how few people have come to the shelters, because one of the great things about Mississippi is that their neighbors take them in, their families take them in, their old college roommates says, come stay with us while you can. But there are shelters. Dial 1-800-621-FEMA, and you can get information about where the specific shelters are. FEMA also has a program where people who are displaced can apply through the number that I said to get rental assistance, to get help in staying at a motel. So there are a number of places where people can go right now, but if you don't have a family member, a friend, a church that is able to put you up, the way to get into the system and find out what is available, specifically what is available in your area, is to call the FEMA direct number.
How long do you expect people to be displaced?
Some of them for several weeks. And when I say displaced, I mean unable to get back to their property. Of course, obviously, many people who are displaced for several weeks, once they get back, they're going to have to rebuild. Which, if you see some areas where the water is up to the roofs of the house, rebuilding will be how long it takes to build a new house, or to totally redo an existing house. But people won't be able to get back to their property in some areas 3, 4, 5 weeks.
Governor, I know we've had plenty of our fair share of disasters over the past few years in the state, but emotionally, how was it to fly over these areas today?
We feel very sorry for people who can do nothing about it except watch. And tornadoes are terrible things, but they come up in a matter of seconds and they're over in a matter of seconds. A flood like this, you'll watch. You see it coming for days and days and days, and then the impact of it lasts, as we were just talking about, for weeks sometime before you can get back to your property, and only then can you start cleaning up and rebuilding. So it's a real tragedy for the people that this happens to, and for the people that are saved, because we have a levee system that's been put in. It has been put in effect over decades. Thank goodness for that. I would say that for 70 years, we in this part of the state were told we're going to build this levee system and we're going to drain all the water out of the North Delta and we're going to put it down in the South Delta on y'all, but don't worry about it because we're going to build pumps. They're going to pump the water on over the levees to protect you. And of course, in the last few years, some left-wing environmentalists have kept those pumps from being built, and so you've got families here who are not protected by the way they were told for 70 years they were going to be protected, who never complained one day when channels were built to straighten out rivers so that the water would drain faster from north to south, because they were always told and believed this is going to be okay because we're going to protect you by putting in these pumps. And you fly up above Steel Bayou where the pump should be, and you realize that properly done, you wouldn't have as much water on the inward side, but more importantly, you could get the water off much faster. That once the Mississippi starts dropping, you can start pumping that water out faster than you can today, because just when you lower the floodgates, the water backs up on you. So that is one thing I couldn't help but think about as we flew over the Steel Bayou gates today, that there are a lot of people who were misled for generations. Their grandparents were told this is what the government's going to do, and then at the end of the game, it turned out to be a bait and switch program by some people on the left.
Governor, do you expect to come back here next week
Yep.
as the river crosses? And
I expect I'll be back more than once. The river's going to crest Thursday
Uh-huh.
of next week, and then there's going to be, there will be inundated areas for a long time after that, and I anticipate being not only back to Vicksburg, but back to these other areas more than once over the next few weeks. A lot of the real FEMA assistance, a lot of the real state assistance is after the fact, is with cleaning up and rebuilding, the restoration of services, support to rebuild homes, businesses, that sort of stuff. And so this is something we'll be working on for the rest of the time that I'm gone.
Governor, I've talked to a lot of people in the last week who are very concerned that the backwater levee is not going to hold, despite that armory. What can you say to those folks to reassure them that that levee is going to hold, based on what you've been told by the Corps?
Well, the Corps is confident it's going to hold, but they've said from the beginning, it's not built to the standards of the Mississippi River levee, and there is always some risk when a levee gets overtopped that it could breach. We don't expect it, and I don't think rumor mongering does anybody any good. What people need to do is be prepared, but don't go around rumor mongering.
Governor, the economic impact of this flood is yet to be written, but what do you foresee? Mississippi's a very large agricultural state, and a lot of agricultural land is being flooded. What do you foresee? I know y'all have been in talks about that.
Yeah, I don't want to be guessing, but I think it is for certain that we'll have $150, $200 million of agricultural losses as a best case. If you have some breach of the backwater levees, you know, that you could multiply that by a couple of numbers. The industrial, commercial losses are something that's going to take a long time to add up, but we have to do it, and we will do it. But I don't really think it serves any purpose for us to be guessing what it's going to be. But we know the least that it's going to be is in the hundreds of millions.
All right, the second part here, in kind of a different subject, those small tributaries like the Bayou Pierre and Port Gibson, those that are starting to back up now, what would you say to residents along those tributaries that may be in danger?
Well, for weeks now, we have been advocating publicly to people. If you're in an area where you had any significant water in 2008, then you should know absolutely you're going to get flooded, and that you should get your property out as early as you can. Furniture, appliances, to the degree that you can literally remove those from the area that might get flooded, do it. If you hadn't done it now, hurry up, because you may be too late. Secondly, elevate things that can be elevated. Third, tie down things that float. Where I am up in Yazoo and Humphreys County, we've taken propane tanks, we've taken gas tanks, we've taken everything and either bolted them down or moved them, because they can float off and destroy somebody's house. I mean, you can take a fair-sized propane tank and it float along and hit a home and do more damage than the flood's gonna do. So, remove what you can, elevate if you can't remove, and then tie down that which could become a projectile. But most of all, evacuate to save your own life. This is a tragedy and a disaster where nobody should die. There should not be one fatality because of this flood. But the hell of it is, you're going to have some people who refuse to evacuate. They're not only going to put their lives at risk, they're going to put at risk the lives of some deputy sheriffs or highway patrolmen or National Guardsmen or conservation officers who have to go out and try to rescue them, probably in the middle of the night. And that's the thing we got to really emphasize, people. Take care of your property, but evacuate to save your life and the life of the people who won't have to come rescue you.
I saw the other day where the president signed a disaster declaration for 14 counties. But later on in the press release, I saw where personal assistance, you're still waiting on personal assistance.
You got that backwards. What they approved was individual assistance. What we're still waiting on is public assistance.
That's what I was asking about.
Public assistance means to help counties and the state government and cities bear the cost. A, the cost of emergency reaction, and B, the cost of rebuilding. And they're being just very cautious, and we're not mad at them at all about it, to make sure that the thresholds under the Stafford Act are met before they give us the approval. Under the Stafford Act, there has to be $3.8 million of disaster costs to government to qualify for a major disaster public assistance declaration. And they just want us to document for them that we've done that. We're going to blow past $3.8 million so fast you won't even remember it. But that's the reason. They're just trying to be prudent.